Teachers of Reddit. What is your best read the note to the class story? Story 1. In high school, a girl in class passed a note to another girl, asking if she had a pad or tampon. Teacher completely blew up, started yelling at them, and asked them to read out loud. They did, and the teacher, who was an older man, immediately calmed down and let it go. I think he was more embarrassed than the girls. Story 2. One time a student had passed a note, and I asked it to be read out. Read bish to take Can bastards had been playing a game of correspondence chess during my lesson. I let them carry on. Story 3. My then fiancé was a high school math teacher. One day, she thought she saw a note being passed, but she wasn't sure, so she waited, and she thought she saw it again. Finally, she saw it, walked over, and took it. It was a wedding card signed by half of the class. Before she took it, she cried, "Edit, yes, she's now my wife." Story 4. Student, not a teacher. It may be the 4th or 5th grade kid is trying to pass me a note and is caught by the teacher. I wasn't paying attention to where it came from. I only noticed when it was about to be handed to me. She makes him read the note in front of the class. He reads the note, and it says, "You want to be my boyfriend? I like the way your booty moves when you walk." I overreact and say I'm not gay, and the boy says I didn't write that, it came from Tasha. Everyone laughs, and she and I are both extremely embarrassed. After class, I go to talk to her at the locker, and she says, "Yeah, I wrote it, but I don't like you like that anymore." Legend has it I'm still single to this day. Edit, my embarrassment has turned to gold. Story 5. When I was in HS, we had a kid pass a note to another kid, all subtle, like they both sat behind me in the same row. The kid did not even read it. He put it in his pocket, but the teacher saw. She made him stand up and told him to pull out the note. He refused. She told him to pull out the note again, and he refused. She legit reached into his pocket and said something like, "Let's see what you are hiding from class." She saw the contents and went white. She grabbed both boys and led them to the office immediately. The note, which I later found out, said something along the lines of "package left in second trash, can of the third empty room," or something like that with gun. "You want need it. Don't this up." The police found a small amount of heroin and a .22 pistol with no ammo in the said trash can underneath some balled up papers. This turned into a mess where the kids both claimed neither one wrote the note and were not the intended recipient. So the school said they would expel everyone from that line of desks, which our parents pretty much stopped. The police tried searching all of our homes, but my parents refused to allow anyone into our home. I was in band at the time and had to take a drug test every 6 weeks. My parents believed me, so they refused to allow the police to search the home. The event never got punished because they could never prove anything other than the teacher saw 2 kids pass a note. About 4 years after graduation, I saw on MySpace, yup, that long ago, that one of them died to an OD and the other was arrested for his murder. They never got him for the murder of supplying drug to a Drew G, but did get him on a drug charge. Story 6. A positive spin. I was long-term subbing a class. One day, I noticed students discreetly passing around a piece of paper while I was teaching. I went to retrieve it and discovered it was a petition signed by each student requesting I remain their teacher for the rest of the year. Story 7. In health class, we were talking about boners and how they fill up with blood. My cousin took a piece of paper and wrote "Your penis is filled with blood" and threw it at some popular kid. The teacher picked it up, and you can see him die inside because of the immaturity of 8th graders and how he has to teach them for a career. Story 8. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school, I started a note from the back row of the class, which was passed and read by nearly everyone in the class. The teacher grabbed it as it went past him. When there was only 3 people left who hasn't read it, I think he was going to read it out to the class, but he looked at it before he read it. All the note said was that the zip on his pants was down. With all respect to him, he calmly zipped up and continued teaching. Story 9. Student, not the teacher. In my college thermodynamics class, the professor said that he didn't care if we got a text message in class. However, he did care if we had our ringers on. So his rule was that if you got a text message and your phone went off loud enough for the whole room to hear it, you had 2 options. You could either read the text out loud to the whole class, or you could bring in donuts for everyone at the next class. There were about 20 of us. Of course, everyone keeps their phones on silent, so it never happens. Until smack dab in the middle of one of the exams, when the professor's phone gets a text message and rings out loud and clear in the middle of the exam. Professor freezes, takes one look at his phone as we all start giggling, and says, "Guess I'm bringing you guys all donuts on Wednesday." They were delicious. Story 10. One day, in middle school, right around when the Nintendo Wii came out, you could add other friends online for certain compatible online Wii games by sharing a serial code of like 16 numbers or something around there. Sitting in the back of our 7th period science class, 3 of my friends and I started to exchange and write down our Wii serial codes on a small piece of paper. We'd pass it down and share it as we passed it and copy them in our notebooks. Our teacher pauses his lecture as he looks at us. He just gets up from the front of the class, walked to our row where the 4 of us sat, put his hand out to my buddy for the paper with all of our serial codes on in, takes a moment to glance at it only to see a matrix of random numbers followed by the first letter of our names. He then glances up at us and then to my buddy with the most dumbfounded stare, squints, and asked, is this some kind of joke? Because I'm clueless on this one. My buddy that had to explain ourselves saved us all the embarrassment and said he'll explain after class as he blushed. Luckily, our teacher was a really cool dude and was fine with that answer and told us to just put it away. We told him after class, and he understood, but also said he was expecting some sort of elaborate code that we were encrypting messages in haha. Story 11, not a note, but an anonymous question to the class. In health class in freshman year of high school, we had to anonymously write questions about sexuality and the reproductive process, and the teacher would pull out a random card, read the question, and respond with a textbook answer. Said teacher was very religious and very open about her faith in a way that almost seemed patronizing. So I was surprised when she pulled out and read a card that said, what does the word mean? She looked at the card, looked at us all calm, and then proceeded to pull up Wikipedia and other web media to inform us of the origin of the word, its connotation, and how it's used differently around the world. I was kind of shocked that she just wanted us to know what it meant, as if to say don't look like a dumb if you want to use this word in a sentence at its sentence blame autocorrect. Not me. Fix. Story 12, I taught for a decade in a really rough area. I intercepted a lot of notes and was pretty shameless in public humiliation of my kids. I read a lot of bad stuff out loud. However, one really nice moment that stands out was when the super popular bubbly Latina girl sat next to the stereotype, depressed, weird white theater band girl. I see them passing notes, which is really uncharacteristic. The band girl seemed off and upset, but I let it go because it seemed like there was something going on more, and the Latina girl was a really nice kid. I didn't think she was bullying or anything. I had the girl stay after for a second and asked them what was up. The Latina girl said, I was worried about her. She looks sadder than usual, so I wanted to make sure she's cool. I asked the other girl if that's what was happening, and she said yep, and showed me the notes, which was a really heartfelt convo about boys, relationships, and feeling lonely. It was so damn sweet. I asked if they needed more time, and they both said yes. I could get them excused from their next class, and they asked if they could chill and talk more. I said sure, because you bet your wellness and mental health is a ton more important than curriculum. They really had a moment, and it seemed to help them both. This was as 10th graders. I got to see them really develop a nice friendship over the next few years. Go girls, wherever you are now, I hope you're still friends, and I'm glad I could help facilitate that. Story 13, another non-teacher here. But my 7th grade teacher typically always wore a dress shirt to class and looked very presentable, but this day, he had his sleeves rolled up. Now, everyone loved this teacher, but my immediate, though, was to write a note to my friend sitting beside me that his arms were super hairy. And that note was passed back and forth with us cracking jokes about it. Nothing malicious or overly mean, just that we didn't think he'd have such hairy arms. We eventually got caught, and between classes he took us aside and warned us to not pass notes. And since this was the first time this happened, he would toss it out without reading it and let us go. Well, a couple months go by, and he decides to wear short sleeves again, and his arms were noticeably less hairy. I know 12-year-olds don't have the greatest moral compass, but to this day, I still feel so bad that my little note might have made him so self-conscious about something so unimportant. I'm sorry, Mr. Fifield, wherever you are now. Story 14, not a teacher, but something one of my teachers told me outside of school. The students were learning about properties of rocks and minerals. The first student wrote, "What's cleavage?" on a note, referencing the mineral property. The second student responded with a human anatomy description. Story 15, not really a note, but when I was teaching college classes, I caught 2 of the girls whispering. So I told them, if you're going to tell secrets, you need to share with the rest of the class. I taught preschool before this. She looked right at me and said, without the slightest embarrassment, I was just telling her that I think you have a cute, but I was teaching a communications class, and we were discussing communications in the workplace, and I looked down at the textbook. After seeing what the next section was, I said okay. Moving on to the next section, titled Sexual Harassment. Everyone roared with laughter. A couple weeks later, at a baseball game paid for by the school, she came on me really hard, with my fiancé right there. Story 16, I'm not a teacher, but I have a story which was kind of the opposite when I was in college. I was in a large math lecture hall 2 times a week, and me and my friends took to making paper planes and throwing them down from the back of the theater. We did it often, and I'm sure we thought we were hilarious. Somehow nobody said a word except for the occasional snicker, and it went on like that, on and off for the semester. Then, on the last day, I remember writing Happy Christmas, Dr. Jones, on a plane and throwing it down, seeing it land in front of the lecturer. He blew a fuse and started shouting about how this had been going on all semester, and he thought it was a disgrace. Then he picked up the plane and read the message. got very embarrassed, and meekly said thank you. I still cringe to think of my childish actions, but it did give me that moment of connection with the lecturer before failing his class. Story 17, 11th grade physics class. I teach maths, but I was assigned to be present in the class for supervision in that school. New teachers get to have a more experienced one in the classroom. I was standing at the back of the class when I saw two kids passing around notes and said, "You want to read that out loud, or maybe give it to me? I could use something to read to help out the guy with not having to deal with it and continue the lesson." That didn't happen, though. The boys start laughing, which makes the class and me laugh, as well the infectious laughter, lol. Instead of giving the paper straight to me, I didn't expect them to read it. The boy opens the note and takes a deep breath. He reads out loud, "Imagine every body tied to the spring is a slice of ham." Everyone lost it. It was such a random thing to say. I believe the physics teacher still has that note edit check this image to see what I'm talking about. Story 18, my favorite wholesome note will always be, "Shut up, Josh, you did not hook up with Maddie last night. You are gayer than Mr. Dinos Regale Akeem. We all support and love your gay." I did not read the note aloud. I just put it down and said, "Watch your language." Story 19, and the student in the story. Not the teacher, yeah, I know, but my current students all text or message on their laptops rather than passing physical notes. In 7th grade science class, my friend and I passed notes to each other through the guy sitting between us. Our teacher caught on to the boys with the note, but knew it wasn't him because it had enough doodles of hearts flowers on it. She opened it up to read to the class to catch whoever did write it. However, the note was written completely in Tolkien's Elvish alphabet, and she couldn't read a word. Most of the class knew that it had to be me and my friend Cause were the only LOTR nerds in the class obsessed enough to teach ourselves the Elvish alphabet, but thankfully no one ratted us out. We were hoping that writing notes in Elvish would keep the boys from reading about my friend's massive crush on one of them, but it ended up also saving us from getting in trouble. Story 20, I was 6th grade, not a teacher. The teacher read aloud a note these two kids were passing back and forth, and it was just all the lyrics to Low by Flo Rida. Story 21, I don't know if this is the best, but it's pretty profound. I usually ignored note passing if a student didn't want to pay attention, but wasn't bothering anyone else. I was cool. In the age of cell phones, notes were kind of outdated anyway. So I had this student who could do origami like a boss, and he was always making all kinds of animal figures and cool shapes that I would put on the corkboard behind my desk. This one day, he is getting his fold on and is completely focused and not paying attention. Before I know it, class is over and it's on my desk. He stops on the way out of my class and says, "You're going to want to read that." I read it, and he asking for lunch money caused his mom took off, and he was hungry. It hurts being a teacher some days. Story 22, I was in 8th grade, and it was a hot, sunny day in mid-May. I wrote it snowing on a piece of paper and showed it to my friend sitting next to me, who immediately looked out the window. We both laughed because obviously it wasn't snowing. Then he and I laughed when I showed it to another student, and they immediately looked out the window. And so on until most of the class is in on the joke and watching as I show the piece of paper to the next unwitting fool. Almost every student knows what's going on when my teacher sees that I'm showing this piece of paper to everyone and making them laugh. She walks over to my desk, looks down at the piece of paper that says it's snowing, and instinctively looks out the window. The entire class bursts out in laughter. Story 23, somewhat related, but in 8th grade history, a girl was too talkative and the teacher yelled, "Hey, why don't you try teaching the class?" And the girl said okay, and got up, took the textbook, and started teaching. She did it perfectly and didn't miss a beat. It was hilarious. Story 24, y'all know those sub-teachers who pass around the attendance form instead of doing it themselves? I had one that did that, then saw the girl behind me pass it to me, and assumed it was a note. Read it out to the class, Aaron Aardvark, Betty Boop, etc. Obviously fake names, didn't believe me at first. Came and took it saying ill, read it out then. Story 25, not a teacher. Someone in my class had a cold and wiped their snot into a scrap piece of paper. As they didn't have a tissue, they then scrunched it up and left on the side of their desk. Teacher saw this, thought it was a note, and grabbed the paper, going through the usual fanfare of the importance, not passing notes around. The look on her face when she opened it was priceless. Story 26, I don't have one because humiliating students is unethical and ineffective at correcting poor behavior. Edit, that's gold, Jerry, gold. Thanks, stranger. Story 27, my sister-in-law was in 7th grade and was passing notes with a friend. The particular note she was writing one day explicitly called the teacher, and when she was caught with the note, instead of reading it out loud, she ran to the restroom and flushed it down the toilet. This story is frequently shared at family get-togethers. Story 28, not me, but a friend of mine who taught 7th grade. He found a note and was about to read it to the class, but when he opened it, the note read, I want you to crack an egg in me. So hard it scrambles, he immediately put it in his locked desk drawer without reading it out loud, and it's now laminated and hung up on his fridge at home. Story 29 had a student give a presentation on a historical math figure. Asked if he could use his phone for notes, literally read the Wikipedia page to the class. As soon as I realized it, I displayed it on the projector behind him. Story 30, not a teacher. But my best story was a kid in my class who killed himself because a teacher made him do this. We were in high school, maybe a bit too old for passing notes, but the note was apologizing to a girl for not satisfying her in bed. Obviously, this was deeply embarrassing. He should have just took the suspension and refused to read the note, and he killed himself that very night. Drug overdose, OxyContin. The school did a big memorial service and explained how he was deeply troubled with issues at home. And I'm sure there's more than one factor, but it sure as didn't help for a teacher to shame him in front of everybody. Story 31 helped my buddy and professor out one time a few years ago. The professor had warned the students to not leave their ringers on in class, or else he would throw the phone out of the window. Everyone assumes he is not serious. My friend was getting rid of his cell phone and offered it up as a sacrifice. I called my friend at scheduled time. My friend said hello, and then the professor walked over, grabbed the phone, and threw it out of the room. I was told the whole class was stunned. Story 32 was the student, not the teacher. In third grade 1996, my class was performing a play. I had a total of 2 lines of dialogue, but I really wanted to get it right. So I copied my lines from the textbook, folded it up, and stuck in my pocket. The teacher only saw the last bit of this, but assumed I was sticking a note in my pocket and told me to get up by front of the class and read it out loud. I recited my lines verbatim and handed the note to the teacher. Without reading it, she assumed I was being a smartass and sent me to the principal's office, where I received recess detention and a call to my parents. Not sure why I never asked anyone to read the note, but I didn't. The next day, when I arrived at school, my teacher pulled me aside and told me that she had read the note, realized what it was, and apologized profusely. She took me down to the office to call my parents and let me go out for 2 periods of recess. Props Mrs. W for the life lesson about humility and doing the right thing. I still remember. Story 33, teacher here. It's never a good idea to do this. Nothing written on that paper is a good outcome for anyone if read aloud. And by forcing them to read it, you send a message that you're willing to just stop having class if they make enough noise. You will very rarely have someone very old do this, or potentially a 30-something with something to prove. By and large, this is a movie trope that is not done. Story 34, back in my substitute teaching days, just out of college, I was subbing for junior high science teacher. I thought the day had been going relatively smoothly, but during a break, I noticed a note on the floor. I picked it up and read it, and it said, Mr. Palkito, is it keep quiet, keep your head down, stay calm. To this day, I appreciate the implication that, to that set of kids, I was like the junior high version of the warden from Shawshank Redemption. We had an exchange student in our speech class, and the teacher caught him reading a note. She asked him to read it out loud, and he immediately gets beet red in the face. Just as he opens his mouth, she asks him to read it in his native language. Croatian is a beautiful language, in case you're wondering, especially when the speaker is a hot guy. Edit, I think he got beet red because he was embarrassed he got caught. The teacher was pretty cool, and she used the opportunity for us all to hear a foreign language we hadn't before. Story 35, I've got a few, but the absolute best one was by a new student who didn't know my backstory with farting in that particular class. Okay, so I subbed in this long-term position. My class was 5th graders. The grip of it was, one day, I farted in front of them. I was at the board and dropped a marker when a spontaneous just ripped into existence. It was long, loud, and ended in a toot. I was mortified. The class was shocked and incredulous, but then they started laughing, and I started laughing because what else can you do? It was funny, and we were all in hysterics for a while. Of course, it became a funny thing to tell any new kid, most of whom also thought it was funny and liked that I was a good sport about it. Another new kid comes one day, is told the story, and just scowled. No biggie, right? A week or so later, I had to correct him over whatever. He was talking in class during a lesson or something, and he got upset when told to stop and said, I heard about you, you farter, which simply made me say, so what, shhhh? So then he passed a note, making a big show, so I see it, I roll. Sometimes you can end up perceived beef a kid has with you if you give them attention. So I grabbed the note and read it aloud. It said, this bish booty stank, LOL. I started laughing, and he started yelling about and another boy shouted whose booty don't stank when they, OMG, I lost it, the class lost it. We all just started cracking up again like on the day of the epic. A girl came to the front of the class to reenact it. She did my mannerisms and voice and facial expressions. It was glorious. I laughed until I cried. The kids too. The Grinch kid at the end gave in and started laughing too. So it turned out well for everyone. He apologized also. I kept that note for a few years. Anytime I was having a bad day, I'd read it, and it always made me smile and laugh a bit. Story 36. Me and a friend in high school used to pass notes back and forth writing song lyrics as we went. This day we were doing the lyrics to David Bowie's Labyrinth Magic song, and I had to stand up and read it. The teacher got even angrier because she didn't believe that was on the note, so she stormed up and snatched the note from my hand. When she realized the note indeed did remind her of the babe, she cracked up laughing before asking us to stop. Story 37. I was actually the note passers in question that got caught. In 8th grade, a buddy and I were passing notes talking about the event happening that weekend local Smash and Halo tournament. The teacher caught me passing back, but just took the paper and didn't force me to read it. Lo and behold, the next morning I get called down to the office. The teacher, who is a fairly old civics teacher, vice principal, school nurse, and my woodshop teacher, who is 27 at the oldest, were all in the office around me. The VP starts off asking me if I'm okay and if I need help. Everyone looks super worried except the woodshop teacher, who is clearly holding in laughter. Unbeknownst to me, ends up my edgy used a sheet of paper that has song lyrics to a Slipknot song on the other side. I used to write song lyrics for my favorite songs while I was bored in class. Ends up, most Slipknot songs, when taken out of context by people who are too old to know the band, sound really troubling. Especially that relatively new song at the time, Wait and Bleed. I tried explaining it to them that I'm fine, and it's legit just a song by a band. I proceeded to show them all the song lyrics by various bands in my notebooks. Nope, they still didn't believe me. Then my woodshop teach finally burst out laughing. It ends up he's been trying to explain the EACT same thing as I said to them for the past half hour. Eventually we both convinced them all was fine, but lol. One perk out of all this. Found out that day my favorite teach was a fan of metal, lol. Story 38. I actually don't do this. I don't think humiliating a child is ever necessary. I might read the note myself, then throw it away, and quietly remind you to keep your attention focused on your work, or I might appreciate that you wrote the note and lost what page are we on, instead of talking. Story 39. Not as a teacher, but in middle school when I was busy writing short stories to my classmates, my teacher busted me. He asked me to read the whole story. Story 40. Probably late, but in 8th grade the teacher took the note and made me read it. I didn't even think to make something up, so I blurted out what was on it. We Beat the Meat's the story of 3 male prostitutes who made it the hard way parody of We Beat the Streets. Thought I was so clever. Story 41. I have a great one for this. Not as the teacher, but as the student who wrote the note. Having recently gained the internet in the 5th grade, I had learned a few new pranks that I wanted to try on my friends. One of these pranks involved a note that your victim is to read aloud. As I passed off the trap note to a friend of mine in choir class, the teacher jumped up and grabbed the note from us. And we ta dead. I'm so fucking lefties repressant after several seconds of stunned silence. We all just kind of pretended nothing happened and continued class as normal. Fond memory. Story 42. Not a teacher, but junior year in high school I got caught passing a note to my friend. The teacher took the note and looked at it. As if she was going to read it out loud. She decided to make me stay after class and talk to her. The note told my friend that I was pregnant. Story 43. Not a note, but fits in with the other post. We were reviewing the entire Foundations design course in class the week before finals. The professor is going over the different foundation types for different subsoil conditions. For example, what do you do if your building is on clay? What do you do if your building is on hard rock, etc.? He gets to what do you do if your foundation is in soft rock, and a few seconds pass before one of the girls busts out laughing in the back of class. The professor, a pretty cool guy, is clearly amused by what's going on and asks what was so funny. She's laughing so hard and can barely speak, so she signals the guy next to her to fill us in. So he says she asked me what soft rock was, so I said, Michael Bolton, it was awesome, probably the best laugh I had in class. Story 44. So I was in a visual basic class back in 10th grade. Our teacher had a few sticky notes in the front of the class with a marker, so you could leave an anonymous question. I'm not sure why. So no one ever used it except for one day. Someone had left a note, he pulled it down at the start of the class and read it out loud. I have a crack in my butt. What should I do? He responded, we all have cracks in our butt, and it isn't something to be ashamed of. Story 45. Not a teacher, but my sister got caught passing a note and was forced to read it in front of the class. The note read, teacher flies down. How do I tell her? Story 46. Not a teacher, but in 8th grade, I wrote the lyrics to Monty Python's The Penis Song in my religion notebook. The nun who was teaching the class found it while grading notebooks and pulled me out of class and into the maintenance closet to read it to her. Then later she called my mom and had a meeting with her in the chapel, and I had to read it to my mom and the nun with Jesus next to me and opera music in the background. My mom told me years later she was trying so hard not to laugh. I'm 27 now, and that story never leaves me. Story 47. I was the student, but have the perfect story for this. Went to small religious school, only 14 kids an entire grade. Was 8th grade and got a new principal that decided to take the kids who sucked at math and take them out of class to personally teach them himself. My best friend and I plus about 4 others were picked, and this guy had a totally different way of doing all the stuff we learned, and we had no idea what was going on and were pretty annoyed at being singled out and made it look even more stupid than we already felt. We were passing a note back and forth talking about the principal. Of course, he comes over and wants to know what it says. I say no, we'll just throw it away. But that pissed him off, so I ripped it up and my friend shoved the pieces in her mouth. Story 48. A few years ago, before college, I used to be in a class where people would pass blank notes and try and get caught by the teacher. They knew the teacher could do nothing about it. And we were still pretty immature, so we thought it was funny when she found notes. As time moved on, people began passing notes with drawings. I remember one person passed a note to me that had a drawing of Thomas the Tank Engine with wings and a halo. Needless to say, she hated our class. Story 49. My teacher told us a story that happened the period before ours this year, and she had the person read it, and it was basically this guy being a guy and drawing random stuff. Then on the back, it was like a really, really formal letter to a girl. Then at the bottom, it said P.S. I want to eat your clitter like apple fritter. Story 50. When I was in high school, my friends and I would pass notes in code. Would use different names for ourselves and other friends, teachers, guys we liked, etc. One semester we were Disney characters, another Sailor Moon characters, and so on. If the note fell into the wrong hands, chances were good they wouldn't understand who we were talking about. Dear Cinderella, did you have a good time on your date last night with Simba? Can I copy your math homework over lunch? I forgot to do mine. Love, Minnie. Story 51. Had a coworker, also a teacher, see a pair of girls hunched over in class and giggling. She walks over to them and sees them doodling. She takes it from them and looks at it. They're beet red and shocked. Teacher holds the paper and then says to the class, what in the world? I can't believe this, girls. This is not okay. The girls are stammering and more red. The teacher marches to the front of the room, towards her camera projector. Continues, can you believe it, class? Can you believe what the girls were drawing? The class is on the edge of their seats, and the girls are almost crying, like, no, don't project it, please. She marches mercilessly closer. She slaps it on the overhead projector. There it is, a giant penis, and everything for all the 8th graders to see. Before anyone can react, she says, now who would dare doodle rocket ships in my class? Class stunned, girl stunned, don't know what to say. She knows what she did. Okay, this is almost relevant. I wasn't a teacher, and it wasn't a note, but it was a tell it to the class story. Our band teacher used to call on us when we were talking or whispering amongst ourselves. He would catch us talking and yell, what did I just say? Inevitably, the person he was yelling at had not been following his speech and had no idea what he had just said. So my next door neighbor and I started whisper repeating to each other every word our band teacher said to us. E, G, teacher. So let's have the first trumpets and first flutes on the harmony, second trumpets and flutes a third below, and first trombones and timpani on the offbeats. Me whispering to my next door neighbor, let's have the first trumpets and first flutes on the harmony, second trumpets and flutes a third below chair neighbor. Whispering to me, and first trombones and timpani on the offbeats. Teacher Starfish, C star, what did I just say? Me with my chair neighbor, let's have the first trumpets and first flutes on the harmony, second trumpets and flutes a third below, and first trombones and timpani on the offbeats. Teacher, stop talking. We only got to do it twice before he stopped yelling at us for talking. Story 52. Not a teacher, but had a note passed to me. Me and my best friend were corresponding, and she had asked me in the first note if I wanted to stay at her house. I responded back no, because I wanted to go play at Wesley's house. Her response, I never got to read, and she never admitted till 10 years later because the teacher asked for our note we were passing back and forth. She was made to go to principal's office and was out of school for the rest of the week. Every time I brought up, she never told me and would change the subject. Finally, after a couple of blunts, she tells me, because I prefer to go to a boy's house instead of hers. She said she hoped I sucked his and choked. We were in 3rd grade.